Hello everyone. Today's lesson is on environmentalism, something that we've touched on throughout the course. A great example being Tragedy of the Commons, where we're looking at land and resource management and trying to make decisions based on our impact and the needs of different people. We can see that biodiversity is decreasing across the world at different rates, but decreasing nonetheless. But the idea of environmentalism is to concern ourselves with environmental protections and to recognize human impact on the world and to seek solutions that help to mediate that. But we've affected our world for as long as we've been around. In our earliest hunting-gathering phases, we caused the extinction of megafauna like the mastodons, woolly mammoths, megafauna, large marsupials in Australia. When we started farming in the agricultural revolution, we dramatically started altering landscapes as we continue to depend on specific areas. But as we develop and learn, early ideas start to show about protecting life for the sake of life through nonviolent means, to protect our resources, even if they're your enemies. And we have all kinds of ethical questions. Should humans continue to cut forests for the sake of human consumption, for instance? If we need these resources, and if there is an environmental impact, don't our needs outweigh the needs of nature? So there's not really a right or wrong answer here. It's more of an ethical dilemma. You may have heard of one of these environmentalists who are living today, David Attenborough. If you don't know his name, you've probably heard him in any nature documentary. The English accent who narrates things like Planet Earth. Greta Thunberg is a very young activist. You see her a lot in social media, often being a little bit more aggressive with protests and stronger activism. And then you have the other extreme, Paul Watson, who was formerly of the group Greenpeace, who would resort to what they call eco-terrorism. He would sabotage ships to stop them from whaling. And these are all effective to varying degrees. Some, like the education of nature documentaries, might not be effective in the short term, but might be more effective in the long term. And the opposite would be true of eco-terrorism. Maybe it's effective in the moment, but long term it's going to damage the ideas and the support that environmentalism might have. So let's take a look at the changing history of environmentalism. For instance, this man Thomas Malthus came up with the idea of one person to come up with the idea and publish it, where if the population increases, you're going to have more food, right? And if the population increases faster than you can produce food, then there's going to be a time where there's not enough food for everybody. And the idea of resources and population balance is still prevalent, but a lot of what he was talking about has been put to the side because we also increase the production of food through technology and research. And a lot of his ideas were not necessarily concerned with all people and populations, but more overpopulation of poor people, which is concerning and not something that we continue to support at the moment. We've mentioned this guy before, Aldo Leopold. I've read his quote a few times. The last word in ignorance is the man who says of an animal or plant, what good is it? The fact that nature exists for its own sake and is important in its own way, whether we need it or not. And to be stewards of our environment and to not dominate wilderness and nature, but become balanced with it. John Muir is one of the people to thank for our national parks. He was a huge influence on Teddy Roosevelt. Our Great Smoky Mountains was established as a park soon after Yosemite and Yellowstone. It's a lot more difficult with being between North Carolina and Tennessee, having to move people from their farms, using taxpayer money, so it wasn't easy and it wasn't without effect on people. Rachel Carson wrote the book Silent Spring, among others, but this one specifically brought to light the use of DDT and the dangers that come with it, and how they can impact biodiversity and prevent birds from laying eggs, or eggs that will end up hatching and killing different fish and other wildlife, not just by spraying them, but building up and traveling through ecosystems and food webs, and eventually affecting us in ways like cancer and neurological diseases. And this book is actually what we credit with the modern U.S. environmentalism movement, and what we base a lot of our actions on. This is maybe a lesser known, one of my favorites. Her name is Wangari Maathai. So she is credited with being the leader of the Greenbelt movement in Kenya, which was a grassroots movement to basically combat deforestation, help people plant trees, really take control and ownership of their own communities. And by just doing something as simple as planting trees, they're improving the resources and the amount of water and other things in their community that make them better at self-sustaining and independent. But these ideas, as you can see, they have changed over time. We've gone from this Aldo Leopold idea of nature for itself, that it is important for its own sake, to nature should be important despite people, that our actions have thoroughly and almost irreversibly damaged the environment, to knowing that nature does something for us almost in every way and should be preserved for that reason, to now it's not just about nature, and it's not just about us, and we're not separate. We are completely interconnected, and what happens to nature eventually will affect us. And a great example of that is environmental justice. Another word for this sometimes used is environmental racism. It actually started in Warren County in North Carolina, where they were dumping soil that had been contaminated with PCBs, which is something found in pesticides. And the community there protested, and a lot of them were arrested, but they brought awareness to how lower income communities are more affected by pollution and environmental damage. The fact that more garbage dumps, more garbage facilities are located in low-income communities than they are anywhere else. Flint, Michigan is another great example of this with their water crisis. There's Cancer Alley in Louisiana, a huge stretch of the Mississippi River where there are so many industrial plants and where mostly minority communities are located, where the rate of cancer is so much higher there. But we see new legislation, new ideas being presented in our government too, like the Green New Deal, which isn't a law or a proposition for a law. It is just a set of ideas to help guide new laws, to not only include ideas about climate change and environmental impact, but also how they affect lower income communities and Native people, people of color, and to take all that into consideration. So if we do decide to make environmental reform, that we do so with a consideration of how it affects the most susceptible. So I'm going to end with this. These are 5 different skills I got from a book here that you can use to practice emotional and social eco-literacy. So literacy is like your ability to read and understand. So this is your ability to communicate, understand, interpret environmentalism and ecological ideas. So the first one would be to develop empathy for life, for all life, just like we were saying with Aldo Leopold. that we embrace sustainability as a community practice, the way we use our resources, that we should do so in a responsible way, not just for ourselves, but for everyone. Tragedy of the commons. We make the invisible visible, like Rachel Carson. We couldn't see how DDT was affecting all these plants and animals, but through research and good communication, we were able to make the right changes. Anticipating unintended consequences. Again, whenever you change your water supply, whenever you dump waste somewhere, what are the consequences potentially going to be? That precautionary principle of how are you going to know what's going to happen? Better safe than sorry. Look before you leap. And understand how nature sustains life, that we are connected, that we don't just use nature, but we are dependent and utterly connected on it in almost every way.